Do you remember the first time you went to a wild place? I do. I was 8 years old. It was a swamp miles from anyone. The only sounds were birds, insects, and the thwap of my rubber boots as I pulled them from the muck.
Conserving nature and choosing the path of sustainable development is a compulsion, not a choice anymore.
We really must protect and promote the pulse of the planet.
Oxygen is much more valuable at this time than gold.
Why do mountains matter? They're a source of fresh water for half the world's population and also contain half of the planet's biodiversity hotspots. Our Hindu Kush Himalaya sustain nearly 2 billion people with water and food. What COP26, the UN Climate Summit, decides today is going to affect us all tomorrow.
But all is not yet lost. There are solutions. Sustainable Summits is here to share some of these. We are an informal network of mountain stakeholders with a mission to relieve pressure on mountain environments and to influence their preservation for future generations.
We send this powerful message from the Hindu Kush Himalaya, the pulse of the planet and the world's highest and most beleaguered mountain range, to reach critical decision makers gathered in Glasgow.
Our Sustainable Summit's global mountain community will highlight some proven solutions to combat the climate crisis that threatens to engulf us all.
Since 2010, our band of mountaineers, scientists, policymakers, conservationists, and indigenous leaders have shared their expertise with practical outcomes in flashpoints around the world. Colorado in the USA, Mount Cook in New Zealand, Mont Blanc in Chamonix, France. And now we speak to you from Nepal, in the shadow of Mount Everest, Sagarmatha.
Please listen. In your hands and in our immediate action to avert this catastrophe rests the future of the planet and indeed all humanity. Act now. There is still time to pull back from the brink.
Our planet Earth, home to humankind, animals, plants, and intricate ecosystems formed over millennia, is undergoing irreparable destruction. The climate crisis is threatening to end the world as we know it. This catastrophe is human-made. Ecosystems, wildlife, weather patterns, everything that links humanity to nature and that we depend on is threatened. The Arctic sea ice and the Antarctic ice sheet, two of the largest reserves of ice in the world, are melting, and it is rightly identified as one of the most significant symptoms of the climate crisis. However, the world's third largest reserve of frozen water, the highest and the largest mountain range in the world, a mountain range upon which 1.9 billion people depend for food and water, the Hindu Kush Himalaya, is melting at an alarmingly fast rate. Yet its cries for help have gone unheard.
If the world manages to stabilize at 1.5 degree Celsius warming by the end of the century, the Hindu Kush Himalayan glaciers are projected to shrink by 1/3. So 1/3 of the glaciers are likely to melt away. But then if we go by current emission scenario, then 2/3 of our glaciers are likely to vanish. So these are quite serious kind of impacts. So what happens here actually is quite important, impacting at least 1/4 of the global population.
Grand mountains are the sources, wonderment and inspiration to many. They are one of the world's most vulnerable ecosystem.
Even if temperatures were to rise by 1.5 degrees, that's too hot for our region. Communities in our region are already facing the brunt of increasingly frequent floods, droughts, and these sorts of impacts are completely destabilizing the well-being of the people that rely on this region.
If you look at springs, they are a part of our agro-ecosystem since ages, and now we all know that springs are drying up. And it is very disturbing because, springs not only fulfill the drinking water needs of our entire community, Himalayan community where we live, it is actually a part of our entire system,
Because we are at the top of the world, we experience everything fast, including climate change impacts. Our glaciers are melting very fast. The snow cover is decreasing, snow line is retreating. Floods are increasing both in frequency and intensity. Disasters in many forms and shapes brought about by unpredictable weather is also increasing.
Here we have periodic drought, and this all effect on agriculture. And also from effect of climate change that include flood and drought, the women have to move their home and have to migration.
The world over, mountains are critical to mountain communities and to those living downstream. The most up-to-date science tells us that we can expect more extreme weather as a result of climate change. That means more drought, more floods, and more disasters.
Last year we had a record warming event in the Tasman Sea, and that leads to massive rainfall events, 1,000 millimetres plus. We've never seen these sorts of rainfall events, and the recession of the glaciers is also making it more difficult to put in huts, visitor facilities, as the ice recedes, and it's been receding at record rates since 2008.
But it isn't just people who are impacted by climate change. The habitats of animals are also impacted, and there is increased human-wildlife conflict. In global biodiversity hotspots such as the mountains of Central Asia, dramatic loss of critical grasslands and overrun of alien and invasive species threaten fragile mountain ecosystems.
In the Andes, for instance, reduced glacier runoff affects water availability for drinking and agriculture. In the Caucasus, sustainable mountain tourism models needs to be developed because of more unpredictable seasonal as well as higher risk of mountain ecosystem degradation. The Hindu Kush Himalayan region is affected by a higher risk of natural disasters.
The climate crisis is a truly global phenomenon, one that should be tackled with efforts at an international scale, and strategies should be formulated keeping in mind that a huge brunt of its devastations will be borne at the earliest stages by some of the most vulnerable communities around the world.
Global warming is changing the glaciers, changing the mountains. But global warming, climate change, is coming from industrialized cities, from traffic in the cities, from traffic everywhere.
This is not just an issue for mountain communities, that rely on these activities, but also for the recreationists and people who benefit and also engage in mountain tourism and recreation for cultural and spiritual opportunities for renewal.
It cannot be emphasized enough how pressing is the need for the world to come together on climate action. We must reduce emissions. We must keep the warming under 1.5 degrees.
The message that needs to go out very loud and clear is that these are not common threats. These are existential threats. They're not country specific. They cannot be addressed by any one country alone. So unless we work together and we find solutions that are cross-cutting and that synergize the actions taken in one country by other countries, we're not going to be able to build regional resilience in a sustainable manner.
We need everyone on the planet to make changes that contribute to a more sustainable future. The IPCC has recently affirmed in its assessment report that the effects of human lifestyle on nature and climate are now undeniable.
As I climbed Mount Everest, I despaired at the mountains of trash everywhere. No respect for place or people, human impact at a very high level.
I strongly feel we must aim high with our actions. We can ensure that our cherished mountains are preserved and protected for future generations.
We need action now, from households to governments, from policies to personal decisions. All our efforts can help save the planet.
The wilderness has been tremendously empowering for me. Over the years, I've rowed across the ocean, I've climbed Mount Everest, I've walked across the Antarctic to the South Pole, and each of those has changed me profoundly. I find the wilderness in all its different forms a very powerful, empowering place. But unfortunately, the human race takes more than it gives.
For my whole life, I live in the community that are close to the mountain, and I have seen so much of the joy and sorrow of that life. I have felt myself a sense of deep satisfaction that is very difficult to put on the words. When I reach summit of mountain like Everest and K2, there is something in the moment that is special, something that each person can feel for herself, something very personal and secret. This is what mountain can give us, moment like no other.
Though we are physically separated, let us be one spirit, one heart, one mind, one love, one focus, one voice. We will not return to what was destroying us. As that snowflake, Let us unite and be significant through our insignificance.
The people that reside in the mountains have inherited not only its mysticism, but also ways to live in harmony with the terrain. Local knowledge, technologies, and attitudes, passed down through generations of living, cannot be marginalized when we are looking for solutions. This experiential wisdom should be taken together with scientific information and understanding to create nuanced, localized solutions.
There is a long tradition of local innovation to confront environmental challenges across the entire Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Homegrown solutions such as advancements in clean cooking, in micro hydro and solar power, and low-cost air quality monitors improve livelihoods while preserving the health of those communities and of our planet.
Since our ancestors have been doing agriculture and farming, we can go back to old ideas and old traditional food which are in harmony with the area, and we can promote the sustainable farming as well.
Working with local people, you are and sharing information, you're giving them the option of making better informed decisions based on scientific data. Now, another is to recognize that local adaptations are already being developed, and perhaps we need to think of incentives that encourage these to continue.
The problems of the climate crisis are vast and require action at all levels. The most effective local solutions need to be shared and adapted to other contexts so that the people in their own communities can do what they can to reduce emissions, to implement and create new nature-based solutions, to restore forests and ecosystems, and to adapt to the impacts of climate change.
Now here in Ladakh, we are not sitting on our hands. We are trying to do whatever we can do. We have had a tradition of people going and building or grafting glaciers, man-made, to secure water. We have been making what we call ice stupa artificial glaciers, conical giant ice forms, which because of their geometry melt only in the summer when water is needed, and are made during the winter when nobody farms and the glacial melts still trickle away into the Indus and into the oceans. Apart from that, we have been working on mitigating our own impact on climate by working on various innovations to build solar heated mud houses that are made with natural materials like clay and soil locally, and with the bright sun that we have. And then we are sharing this within Ladakh and in the whole region. It's often a beautiful sight to see students, even venerable monks of monasteries and soldiers from the army working together in the Himalayan valleys, planting vegetation to heal these damaged ecosystems.
Now we all know the springs are drying up. South Sikkim and parts of West Sikkim, which falls in the rain shadow area of the Darjeeling Himalayas, water was becoming a problem, and when we went to the people asking what can be done for their development, they said, you just provide us water. All we did was we tried to identify this recharge areas, and also we tried to dig trenches and pits to allow this to capture the rainfall, to infiltrate into the soil, so that these springs will get their will be recharged. And this has proved to be very, very successful. So basically, for spring shed revival, all we've been doing is to see where the recharge area is, and then we have to understand the geohydrology of the area and where the tilt of the rocks are.
Through the Tourovation Hub, we are supporting tourism enterprises. Tourism enterprises become more climate resilient. And how we do that is helping them develop business models that integrate renewable energy solutions. From the get-go already, we are trying to instill the social and environmental perspectives into their value propositions. Through the use of the business model canvases, they start thinking about what is the environmental impact, what are the social impacts, and at the same time, what kind of revenues are they able to generate by a particular introduction. Say, for example, what is the return on investment? What kind of implication does it have?
Renewable energy and energy-efficient solutions are important for mountain communities and their enterprises. Such solutions help in building resilience and bring inclusive development in the region. Solutions have to be decentralized, customized, and delivered, taking into consideration the entire ecosystem within which it is operated. The value chain approach, looking from the supply and demand perspectives, becomes an important entry point in this regard.
We look at it right from the production stage all the way to the processing stage. We look at what are the energy nodal points in a value chain that makes sense to an end user. And we try to understand what kind of machinery is there, what is available on the market, what maybe needs to be created new. How do you look at efficiency of the system? How do you look, is there a grid connection, or do we look at solar powering it? And are there local organizations that can actually manufacture and deliver these solutions and provide after-sales service? So there's a lot of thought that goes in the pre-stage, the during, and the post-stage to make sure there's a continuity and sustainability to it.
Local, eco-friendly tourism solutions are another way to bridge the need for economic development with the concerns of the climate crisis.
There is a huge scope and opportunity in building back better mountain tourism in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Our offering in this mountain landscape, whether we talk about the Karakoram range in Western Himalaya, the Everest, the Mount Kanchenjunga, or even Kakaboraji range in Eastern Himalaya. Our nature, the culture, as well as the agri-based tourism goods and services are very much thriving from the utilization of these products that are very much nature-centric. But this is also building a lot of synergy in regards to the emerging high-value niche markets such as ecotourism, wellness tourism, culinary tourism. There is a huge scope in enhancing the quality of the goods and services, as well as in making these tourism offerings along the value chain, and also that it brings inclusive growth among the youths and women.
The responsible tourism is needed to be promoted in the mountains. I mean, we are the one who want to see the mountain. We are the one who want to trek there. But when we go there, are we really conscious about what sort of activities we are taking on? Are the things that we are doing environmentally friendly? How we can keep the environment safe and how we can really enjoy.
But the mountain receives approximately 700-800 climbers per year, compared to the whole Khumbu region, which has almost 80,000 visitors per year. And that makes the environmental challenges of solid waste a much greater issue in the whole region than solely on the mountain. Sagarmatha Next has then developed and tested a collective waste transportation system for the solid waste that we call Carry Me Back. The idea is to offer all visitors and locals the opportunity to take a Carry Me Back bag containing 1 kilogram of processed waste, shredded, baled plastics and metals, and carry it with them when returning back down to Lukla. The Carry Me Back test pilot was done in October of 2019, and over a 5 weeks period, more than 2,000 visitors, guides participated and brought more than 4,000 kilos of waste back down to Lukla.
And as these solutions are developed and implemented, they must also be integrated into policy frameworks. The solutions, if adapted locally and institutionalized with local government or community support, can have an actual impact. But to make that happen, we need platforms for sharing local, sometimes simple solutions so that communities, governments can take up the solutions most appropriate for their contexts. Both the public and private sectors play crucial roles here. For instance, in the Chittagong Hill Tract of Bangladesh, efforts to revive springs and build resilience of local people through community-based resource-efficient tourism are carried out through strong public-private and community collaboration.
The involvement of local people is important to make any initiative, endeavors, project successful. So we have to involve the local people. So we are also trying to involve the traditional leaderships along with the local government bodies in 3 hill districts.
And while sustainability of the green initiatives and solutions is largely intertwined with financial system, private sectors such as financial institutions play a critical role. Aligning financial flows to green, resilient and inclusive development will be key to delivering ambitious climate action in the Hindu Kush Himalaya. Bank of Bhutan provides an example of how financial institutions are rising to the challenge by designing green financial products and also developing principles like climate disclosure and climate-responsive environmental, social and governance safeguards to align financial investment with green, resilient and inclusive development.
The green and sustainable development is possible only when we make our financial system strong and resilient, because it is the responsibility of the financial sector to reallocate the resources to the right areas.
In East Africa, for instance, we collect concrete adaptation solutions, such as education program at Mount Kenya, income diversification for mountain communities in Tanzania, and resilient agroforestry in Burundi. These innovative approaches will be shared with regional stakeholders of the East African community to scale up ambition and action for mountain communities. The collected solutions are further uploaded into a public online database, hopefully leading to scaled action, transferred knowledge, and more resilience of mountain communities.
While problems require a range of solutions, there is also a range of opportunities that we can seize to ensure that climate change adaptation and resilience building efforts are focused on green and inclusive development.
The Himalayas are also mountains of opportunity. With large forestry and hydropower resources, the Hindu Kush Himalaya region can generate significant emissions reductions.
Globally, we know that the only way to reach climate stabilized at 1.5 degrees is by reducing not just the emissions of long-lived greenhouse gases, but also of short-lived climate pollutants, such as black carbon and methane. Addressing the short-lived climate pollutants as well as the greenhouse gases, reducing emissions, switching to improved refrigerants, switching people to cooking with clean fuels, reducing open fires, agricultural fires, improved forest management, reducing forest fires, improved solid waste management. Measures that are fairly logical, that have a lot of local benefits, that are generally fairly easy to introduce, would together help clean up the air quality for a large fraction of the population in Asia, while also reducing emissions of substances that then affect the monsoon, that affect the cryosphere.
We believe that the key to nurturing remote communities is to provide practical and eco-positive solutions to community problems. it's important to actively involve those communities in identifying their needs and working in concert with the national and local authorities.
The days of bigger and better is over. What we need now are localized and small solutions. And sustainable tourism in the mountains is the only way to ensure holistic development of the people living in the mountains.
I used to think that we were doing no more than delaying the inevitable migration of pastoral hill people to the urban centres. I now believe that it is possible to reverse this trend and make once unviable villages flourish again.
Now is the time to act. Solutions are out there and more are possible. But these solutions need to be shared and adopted at bigger and broader scale and with more urgent speed. While some work has started, now is the time to collectively, as a planet, ramp it up.
Mountains symbolize constancy and strength. Spiritually, it signifies the absolute state of consciousness. From the time immemorial, humans seeking spiritual enlightenment have found their way to the mountains.
In my lifetime, I have witnessed vast changes to the mountain environment and lives and livelihood of mountain people due to climate change. I know that the Himalayas are not alone in this. The mountain communities around the world share a similar plight.
For ages, Siberian cranes, native to northern Russia, have been traveling thousands of kilometers to spend their winters in Iran, Nepal, India, and China. For them, the world is one. Higher temperatures leading to increased drought, habitat destruction, and rising pollution has meant an obstruction in the migratory pattern for these birds, as has been the case for many other species. The climate crisis has led disruptions in the way the entire planet functions. These disruptions are spiraling into irreversible changes.
Regardless of the geography, we live in an interconnected world. What happens in one place in the world happens everywhere else. So what do we do as a world to address the issues at hand?
Ecological corridors that connect us are very important for sustaining lives and biodiversity. We also share air corridors that play an important role both in managing air quality and air pollution, especially with regard to black carbon that accelerates glacial melting. All these are very compelling reasons for collaboration to strengthen regional resilience.
Together we can build some research strategy. Together we can learn from each other how we can cope with the climate change related disasters and climate change adaptation interventions. And maybe we can collaboratively work to address such issues, and we can achieve the net zero emission by 2050 for our common future.
Our climate problems are shared, and natural resources like air and water know no national boundaries. So our solutions also have to be transboundary, countries have to come together to cooperate on shared problems that can be only solved regionally.
The brick clean industry that is very important for countries like Nepal, Pakistan and India. Now here is where we can cooperate in the form of technology transfer into transforming and adopting technologies that are less polluting. So this is already happening, and we are happy that we are already working on transforming the energy sector, in transforming the industries into less polluting ones. Now another example is in the area of disaster risk reduction. As you know, floods also know no national boundaries. So if you want to reduce loss of lives and property, then we need to cooperate in terms of exchanging information, in terms of exchanging knowledge and good practices.
Regional cooperation has an increasing role to play here too. Recent estimates show that regional power trade can reduce emissions by 9% by better matching of supply and demand. Secondly, securing the investments needed to make the HKH green, resilient and prosperous. We have doubled our commitment to international climate finance spending to £11.6 billion between 2021 and 2025. But we know that we need to multiply this figure by working with partner governments and the private sector in the region.
Adding strength to strength, countries coming together to cooperate regionally will help us to create the global impact we need to truly tackle the climate crisis. Mountain ranges themselves cross national boundaries, and cooperating across those boundaries on biodiversity conservation, on air pollution mitigation, and on disaster risk reduction can be the starting point for broader cooperation on emissions reduction and other critical climate change impact areas.
Mountains are our living, working place and our playground. Mountains are our legacy, and it's our duty to take care of them for the next generation. It will only be possible thanks to ambitious cross-border programs and strong political commitments.
We believe the Sustainable Summit Conference is an opportunity to share best practices for our mountains, one of the last areas on the planet where human presence is merely transient.
The role of the Sustainable Summits Conference is incredibly important today, because we need to reach out to the people who make the decisions that protect our high mountains for humanity.
Promotion of international collaboration and exchange is also important. We once took a group of not only Asian or Himalayan scientists from China and Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, but also Andean engineers and glacial lake experts up to Imja Lake to exchange experiences in dealing with glacial lakes, which was a very productive exercise, not only because it promoted scientist to scientist exchange, but because local people came along.
Bringing sustainable mountain tourism in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region in times of climate and health crisis calls for innovation in view of the need for a new vision for tourism, fit for post-pandemic and changing climate world.
In the coming decades, the effort to really rebuild tourism has to take into considerations how they can also address some of the bigger global agendas, such as addressing sustainable development goal, as well as taking into considerations how the building back better can really contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and also take a strong actions on climate change. So when we reflect the impacts created by the pandemic as well as climate crisis, it helps us to appreciate the fact that any effort to rebuild better tourism, business as usual is not going to be sufficient. So this is actually a stark reminder that any effort for us to build back better tourism has to be relooked from a perspective of how we can bring innovations.
Each country has its own good practices, and good experiences. China is supporting mountain communities to develop this rural tourism as a way to shift from carbon-intensive economy to low-carbon economy. So this creates a lot of jobs and opportunities for mountain people, enables the mountain communities to reduce their dependence on extractive use of local resources and help the transformation of China's overall economy. I think the regional practices, not only from China, can be spread into other countries, but from Nepal, from Bhutan, from all the other member countries, can also be spread, disseminated into China and other countries.
Cooperation is critical. For example, better regional cooperation on water management in the Himalayas, the water tower of Asia that can help over 1 billion people cope better with floods and droughts, or increasing regional energy trade to help South Asia meet its energy demand without increasing emissions.
But there is no time to wait. We need to act with the urgency that this crisis demands.
Success will depend on international and regional partnerships that break down trade barriers, that promote cross-cutting innovation, and encourages truly inclusive development. Mountain communities are in a critical position to advance these solutions.
We all know what we must do, starting with correcting consumption habit, reducing plastic waste, adopting clean energy, and changing this lackluster attitude we have towards our planet. And if we all do this together, we can still save our planet.
Definitely, I would give a call to the leaders of the world to please allocate your defense budgets to the true defense of this planet and humanity, not in this man-made calamity of wars that can be avoided. What is difficult to avoid, again, mostly man-made, is climate change. So you must have your food where your mouth is, and your insecurity and your threat is more from climate.
Climate change cannot be denied, but it can be slowed and eventually stopped. Our biggest hope right now is to put aside our differences and act together to fight it. There is no alternative.
Over the last few months, a series of recent scientific findings on global warming and its impact have sent alarm bells ringing.
It is found that rising temperatures could melt away at least 1/3 of the ice in the Himalayas by the end of the century. And that is an optimistic scenario, assuming the most ambitious climate change targets are met.
How badly will their disappearance hurt billions of Asians who depend on them to survive?
This is a climate crisis that you haven't heard of.
So I'm here in Johnson, in the central mountain region of Nepal. We have traveled, as you can see, over the mountain range, absolutely magnificent, but you can also see the fragility of the mountain range and what climate change is doing to it. I've had a chance to speak to some of the mountain communities here today, and for them, climate change has real life effects: floods, droughts, landslides. And they've talked about the fact that because of what has happened here, whole communities have had to migrate, have had to move. and we need to address this issue head on. So on the road to COP26 and at COP26, we need to ensure that the voices of communities like this are heard loud and clear so we can bring about change and tackle climate change for good.
Steps need to be taken beyond the individual and local, regional and international. We need agreements to determine those shared steps. At COP26, we need to recognize the importance of mountains for our planet. What happens in the mountains affects the planet. And COP26 is the platform to put forward an action plan to implement the Paris Agreement, the global treaty designed to address the climate crisis. The Paris Agreement includes 3 important goals: climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and financing.
This is a very important meeting because what countries put forward on the table in terms of how they'll implement these goals will have implications for our region for the next decade. So it's critically important that mountain voices are part of this debate and that mountain priorities are reflected in the actions that are agreed upon and then taken forward.
In our upcoming National Adaptation Plan, we will have different adaptation strategy for medium term and long term in different sectors. We are robust in terms of policy and we are well equipped in terms of policy and guidelines. Also, we have institutional mechanism to translate that policy into practice. First of all, our priority was adaptation, but now we also consider for mitigation as well, because Nepal is in developing stage. In the name of development, we need to be mindful for the environment, because we have committed net zero emission by 2050, and we need to take that target into account while doing the development works.
What has become clear is that mountain areas are especially effective and vulnerable to climate change, and the next decades are crucial for both mitigation and adaptation. UNEP's annual emission gap report tells us that pledges and actions on the Paris Agreement must get a lot stronger in build-up to the forthcoming COP26 in Glasgow.
So I'm particularly focused on supporting the race to resilience and ensuring that the 3 billion people that rely on the HKA mountains for their lives and livelihoods do not lose out to the climate change challenge. The World Bank estimates that climate change can push over 40 million people back into poverty in South Asia alone unless its impacts are reduced and better coping mechanisms are put in place.
This pandemic has clearly showed the essential need of taking care of our people and our environment, naturally, especially in mountain areas where adaptation faced to climate change are now mandatory. More than ever, we are faced to the increasing of the temperature, the permafrost melting, and the intensification of extreme events.
The financial sector is the most important link in the green and sustainable finance. So, I would actually suggest that all the financial institutions should come together. We should have a expertise from the financial sector to drive this opportunity towards green and sustainable finance. And also the financial sector must make commitment towards the green and sustainable finance.
Finance plays a vital role in the transition to a clean economy and building a climate-resilient future. The United States is mobilizing financial resources to assist developing countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build resilience to the impact of climate change. Governments can support green capital flows by building climate-friendly business ecosystems and encouraging transparency in climate finance reporting and tracking.
We need those at COP26 to recognize the unique climate change threats to mountains and to invest in mountain-specific priorities to build the resilience of mountain communities at the front line of climate change impacts.
We at ICIMOD are working with our regional member countries to take forward the HKH to Glasgow campaign. Under this campaign, we have two objectives. The first one is to promote ambitious climate action for the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, and the second one is to scale up investment in mountain-specific priorities. There are three messages that we are taking to COP26. The first one is that the HKH is the pulse of the planet, and as such, it must be recognized as a global resource which supports 1/3 of humanity. The second message that we are taking forward is mountains of opportunity. So in order to implement ambitious climate action, there is a need to scale up investment in mountain-specific priorities. The third message that we are focusing on is what we refer to as the power of 8. And this really is about our 8 countries coming together, working together, and by doing so, being able to leverage better regional cooperation and international cooperation to really support or scale up investment in mountain-specific priorities.
The health of the planet is tied up to the health of the human population, and that they are two sides of the same coin. By 2030, the worst effects of climate change may be irreversible. Let us mark 2021 to profoundly re-evaluate our policies, systems, structures, investments, and most importantly, the actions on the ground to avoid extreme scenario we find ourselves currently in.
When we control the heating, we could have a normal life. There is no melting of snow and ice. We have water timely, not untimely, flat and melting.
We know where we want to be. We also know how to get there. We just need to act. People need to rise up and do something. We have plans upon plans upon plans and strategies upon strategies, but where are we in the implementation? This is a call to action for all of us. We will not have it in decades to come if we don't act now.
For all of us, climbers, scientists, researchers, guides, businesses, communities that are inspired by the mountains and vertical spaces, that the mountains are where we find our inspiration and define our very being. We must all be part of the solution as individuals and organizations, and we remain optimistic, together through conversation and leadership, through hard work, that we will find solutions to this growing impact.
I have seen the impact of climate change on the mountains. We need COP26 to agree an ambitious deal that will make this summit sustainable. Together, we can make climate action possible. Let's stick together.
No one seeing the impacts of climate change on the mountains today can deny their importance. As ambassador to Nepal, I'm lucky enough to have flown over the Himalayas and trekked in the Everest region, and I've seen the changes firsthand. The call for action from mountain countries needs to be heard at COP26. Without increased ambition at COP26, we can't preserve the mountains. Mountains that, as ICIMOD have rightly said, are the pulse of the planet. Together, we can invest in the opportunities and deliver proven solutions that will make a real difference to mountain communities and to the health of the planet.
I think that the huge problem is basically, well, human greed for power and money. That if we don't reset, humanity in the future is in huge question.
There is tremendous potential for tourism. There is always the possibility of doing things the right way and getting beneficial results from it.
As climbers and stewards of our mountains, we must think into the future and take steps that may feel uncomfortable and possibly not achievable immediately. But we must start this process now. Goal 1, we must remove everything from our climbs and leave nothing behind. This is already required for climbers in Antarctica, and many climbers have achieved this on Denali. Our trash should be minimized and brought to certified disposal locations or brought home. Our human waste must be brought out and disposed of in certified compostable locations or in regulated sewage systems. Goal 2, can we achieve a zero carbon footprint when we undertake our mountain adventures? You might say that seems far-fetched, but I say let's figure out how it can be done. If we can lay out a plan that we can begin working on this goal, let's start it. We can be leaders in the zero carbon footprint.
With so many glacial lakes and a number of them at risk of bursting, livelihoods, life itself downstream is threatened in the mountain communities. My plea to COP26 would be pay attention to the need to safeguard the environmental integrity of our mountain ecosystems and of the lives and safety of the communities which live in and are part of those ecosystems. Just as we know that small island states are threatened by rising sea levels, so our mountain communities are affected by global warming very, very significantly. So to COP26, think about the survival of life of these resilient communities which have taken on every challenge ever thrown at them. But they need international support and solidarity now to face down the existential crisis of climate change.